This week, Mohamed Fahmy finally received a temporary Canadian passport, a personal victory for the journalist who is still defending his name in the Egyptian courts. And joining us now for more in Cairo, Egypt, via Skype, Mohamed Fahmy, Canadian journalist who is on trial in Egypt on terror-related charges. And Mr. Fahmy, as I welcome you to the broadcast tonight, perhaps we could start by your telling us the circumstances under which that passport was handed to you. Tell us about it.
Well, I've been trying to get the passport since I was released in February, and just yesterday outside the court, the ambassador called me over to his vehicle and handed me the passport, which seemed like a prize. It was almost a celebratory moment for me and my fiance, because that passport means just so much more than a travel document. In Cairo and Egypt here, you need a passport to get married, to rent a flat, to rent a car, to just do your normal banking transactions. So it was a very, very important document to have. And moreover, I have to use it for security purposes. In Egypt right now, there are security checkpoints dotted all over the streets. And walking around with no official recognized document is a major problem.
Why do you think there was such a long delay in your getting that?
I'm not really sure about the answer for this question, and I've been asked by many people that question, especially that the judge here in Egypt, with the presence of the Canadian ambassador in court, said that he has no issues with me getting a new passport. And all I had to do was get a police report indicating that it was lost, and I did that, and I gave it to the ambassador here, and Ottawa still came back with a refusal. So I really don't know the answer for this one, Steve.
Do you have it with you right now on your person?
I do. I walk with it all the time, and it's interesting how it became sort of part of the headlines outside the court, which was a diversion from the true crisis I'm going through here, which is the terrorism charges that I'm facing. But it was a big deal not getting the passport, and many people here in the Egyptian media and the headlines were very shocked at the Canadian stance toward refusal to give me a passport, especially that I'm on a travel ban, so I wouldn't be able to use it for traveling or to escape, so if I could say that.
Well, you can say that because you've anticipated my next question, which was, I'm sure there are some people watching us saying, now that he's got that passport, why doesn't he skip town? You can't, right?
Of course I can't. And my name is on a computer in the airport. I would never be able to pass passport control. And that is not the reason why I wanted the passport. I wanted it specifically to get married and to feel much more secure as I feel now, knowing that a police officer will not have any excuse to book me in again, especially that I am under the microscope. I go to the police station every day and sign in. It's sort of a conditional bail, Steve, and I need to do that until I get the final verdict and be cleared and be able to travel back to Canada.
Mr. Fahmy, I don't want to assume that everybody watching us right now knows what you've been through and recalls the circumstances of your arrest. So would you be good enough to just spend a bit of time with us right now and remind us why you were arrested, what the circumstances were at the time?
Well, I was arrested in December 2013, and I was accused of conspiring with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is designated as a terrorist organization in Egypt, and fabricating news for the Al Jazeera English network where I am employed. I was the bureau chief of that office, and I've been a journalist for 15 years, and I know Egypt's story very well. And it's very ironic because we were reporting, me and my colleague Peter Greste and Baher, the three of us are accused in this case. We were reporting the decision by Egypt to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists. And anyone who conspires with them or joins their protests or publishes their news. And 3 days later, we ourselves became the story. We became designated as terrorists. And of course, that's unacceptable under any circumstances. And this is what I'm still fighting now, a year and a half later.
You were in prison for more than a year. What was the most challenging part of being in a prison in Egypt?
The most challenging part was being in the solitary confinement in the terrorist wing with hardcore jihadists who just came back from Syria, ISIS sympathizers, and others who, like Mr. Mohammed al-Zawahiri, who's the brother of Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, and other hardliners who now became part of my daily life. Of course, in the beginning, I was sort of trying to just be the journalist I am and interviewing them and trying to get information from them and saying, okay, these days are going to pass by. And apparently it didn't. And we were charged and we had to go to trial and we were sentenced to 7 years. And now I'm fighting for the retrial so I can get exonerated. So it was a very, very tough situation to be in solitary confinement with no outing 24 hours a day, no light, no food. You could only see your family once a week through a glass barrier. And it was really tough, but you'll be surprised at how a human being can adapt so mentally and physically, and how the threshold increases and you become much stronger as it goes. But of course, that only happens with the sort of support I had, luckily, from my family and from people like you, Steve. Journalists really made a big difference to me. And in that solitary confinement, I was getting snippets of news of the sort of unprecedented support that was happening in Canada and all over the world. And that kept me going, knowing I was fighting for a bigger cause and that I was not forgotten.
Having said that, I have interviewed others who've been in solitary confinement who have said it is like torture. Was it for you?
We did call it psychological torture, me and my colleagues in court, because you don't know what time it is, you have no reading material, and it's designed to break you. And this is when you, as a person inside, you have to just keep your mind straight and fight it as hard as you can. And that's exactly what we did in that prison. And then it got better. We moved to a better prison, and we were together, the three of us in one cell that we called the shoebox. It was still small, but the fact that you can have your colleagues there to talk, and we started getting reading material and newspapers. The Canadian ambassador here was visiting me and bringing me all sorts of newspapers and books, and it got a bit better as we continued our imprisonment.
Any physical altercations or reasons to fear for your safety?
To feel for my safety right now in Egypt, there's no direct fear for my safety. I have positioned myself as an outspoken free press campaigner and a man who's fighting for his exoneration. And this is how I will continue to position myself until I'm free to be a journalist again. However, inside the prison, it got a bit complicated because in time, it became very apparent to the jihadists that I was not acceptable of any of their ideologies, and that I had issues with the way they looked at everything, democracy, the way they reject democracy, the way they just want to fight and topple the regime here. But I could say that I survived it.
You survived it, meaning no one, well, by saying I survived it, yes, of course you've survived it, but did anybody beat you up or physically threaten you, that kind of thing?
No. We were treated with total respect. However, I had a medical issue with my arm, and it was neglected in prison. I didn't get the proper medical attention, and now it has become a permanent disability in my right arm. I can't really raise it more than 90 degrees, although the ministry here finally, gave me that support I needed months later when my injury became a malunion in the shoulder. And I did get an operation, and I was hospitalized during my imprisonment. However, the first thing I'm going to do when I go to Canada is have another operation, corrective bone operation, to hopefully fix it and improve the range of motion.
How did you get the news that you were free to leave prison?
I got the news at 4 a.m. They came and they told me it's time to go, and I was very surprised because I thought it would happen in the morning. I think they did that to avoid the media backlash and the sort of coverage that we were getting. And I just, I ended up in the police station with my family, and I went to my mom's house at 5 in the morning, and it was a very, very emotional reception, lots of tears of happiness, of course, and that feeling of being back with your fiancée and your mother and being able to sleep in your bed and eat your mom's food and not worry about a police officer behind your back watching you for 24 hours a day. So that's much better. But now I'm still suffering with this cloud hovering over my head about the retrial and the possible verdict that's coming up the next couple of months.
Did you not at some point have to renounce your Egyptian citizenship through this process?
Yes, of course I did. What happened? Yes.
I was just going to ask how traumatic that was for you.
that was very traumatic because no one should be given that option for freedom or in return for renouncing his citizenship. And what happened basically is President Sisi announced this decree that allows the deportation of foreigners back to their hometown. And because I have two passports, Canadian and Egyptian, I was asked to renounce it. I refused in the beginning, and then they put the minister on the phone from Egypt, and he explained to me that that's my only way out for me and Peter Greste, my colleague. And I did that. And the Canadian embassy here was aware of every single detail of what was going on. Mr. John Baird, our former foreign minister, flew into Egypt and announced to the world that I was going to be released imminently. That word imminent resonated as breaking news on CNN and different channels and all the Canadian channels and the Egyptian channels. And I was literally preparing to leave. I got my bags. I was psychologically ready. I was even preparing for my arrival in Toronto, and my lawyer Amal Clooney was coming to Toronto, and we were going to have a press conference. Suddenly, Peter Greste was released and sent to Australia. He's a free man now, and I was placed again on the charge sheet, and I'm in court.
You know, Mr. Fahmy, this federal government has often taken pride in the fact that it intervenes forcefully and frequently, when necessary, to get Canadians who are in trouble outside the country out of trouble. For some reason, you have repeatedly called on the Prime Minister to do so in your case, and it hasn't happened. Do you know why?
I don't know why. I don't believe it's any of that talk about dual citizenship or being a Muslim or any of that stuff. I just, everybody was criticizing the Canadian government stance here and in the States, the way they handled it from the beginning, and I refused to accept that. And I kept saying that, you know, maybe the bullhorn diplomacy is not the best idea, especially after the sentence. Canada's rhetoric was that the sentence was very disappointing, while the U.S., John Kerry, called it a draconian sentence, although he had no defendants in the cage. And then as the crisis continued, I realized that indeed Canada's mild stance and approach did not get me out of this crisis, and I was not deported when I had the chance. They had the chance to extract me from this situation, like what happened with Peter Greste. And I was telling the officials here that they need to engage directly with the Canadian, with the Egyptian president, with the ministers here, with the prosecutor, and go meet them face to face. They could not rely on emails and faxes because at the moment Egypt is going through a transition, and a lot of stuff could be lost in translation. And that is what I hope the government understands now in Canada, because I could still be sentenced and returned back to prison, and then I will need their push more than anything ever, and I would need Mr. Harper to intervene directly to get me extracted and back to Canada.
Do you yet have an acceptable explanation as to why John Baird, when he was foreign minister, described your departure as imminent when clearly it was not?
No, I don't have an explanation. This story we're going through here is like Kafka's The Trial. If you're aware of how it all went, there are a lot of hidden secrets on who's pulling the strings, what is exactly happening, why I'm even accused of this bogus charges of conspiring with the Muslim Brotherhood or fabricating news. And anyone that has watched our trial will tell you that it was a serious joke. Journalists were laughing. I was laughing in the cage. And the trial was really publicized more than any trial here in Egypt, and it was attended by diplomats from different countries, Holland, England, the US, Canada, and all the journalists were there. And we don't have any answers for a lot of these strange issues.
Mr. Fahmy, I know you're going to forgive this next question, but again, I'm sure there are some people thinking, he hasn't lived here in a long time. Sure, the charges are trumped up, and frankly, everything we've read and heard about this trial suggests they're trumped up charges, and of course, you're guilty of nothing. But for those who say, he hasn't been here in a while, why should we stick our neck out for the guy? What's the answer to them?
Well, I've been seeing this sort of rhetoric in social media, and the answer is I came to Canada when I was in college. I studied in Montreal, and I studied in Vancouver, in Concordia, and La Salle College in Montreal. I still have a condominium there. We pay our taxes. We embrace all the Canadian, the culture, the values, and the Egyptian as well. And we're a family that completely abide by the rules, and I'm a recognized journalist. I tell people like that if the Canadian government is sets this image that they're not fighting for their Canadian citizens abroad. It's not good, because the Middle East is going through a serious turbulence of political issues, and any Canadian tomorrow morning who's innocent could be in my same situation. If Canada is perceived as a government who's taking a mild stance, then others will be in my same situation, be it journalists or doctors or any other profession. And our government in Canada should put their clout and make it very clear that although, for example, Mr. Harper is, he's supportive of Mr. Sisi's, the president in Egypt, ideologies towards terrorism and the war on terror. I mean, that's fine. That's his business, and that's the way he wants to continue. But however, that doesn't mean that you leave your citizen out to dry. And, I can't believe what we went through for 2 months to get my passport, which is something that should not have taken all that attention and all that energy away from the original trial I'm going through here, which is the main problem here, not the passport.
How hopeful are you that the Canadian government may yet still react more forcefully and helpfully to your situation?
I think the Canadian government has responded positively since this issue has been out in the open in the media about this, and the ambassador here is almost on a daily communication with me. He started to meet the prosecutor face to face, and he's becoming more active towards the case itself. I'm also relying on members of opposition in Canada who have done a great job on my behalf in intervening in the passport issue, and I know they will continue supporting me in the issue of deportation when I need it most. Mr. Paul Dewar from the NDP, Mr. Justin Trudeau, Mr. Marc Garneau, they've all called me on several occasions, and their emails going back and forth to literally understand what my case is, what problems I'm facing, and what they can do to help. And they did come through with the issue of the passport, and that's what I hope our Prime Minister does as well, because this war on terror cannot be used to clamp down on civil liberties, and that's what's happening all over the region here, but it shouldn't be like that in Canada.
Let me share with you and our viewers something that you wrote in the Globe and Mail about a month ago. You wrote, "I have not lost sight of the Egyptian prosecution who unjustly put me behind bars, and I have been the most outspoken in court and in my statements released from prison throughout the past year against my captors. However, challenging Al Jazeera's epic negligence on behalf of scores of current and former staff members is also my responsibility before they end up behind bars." What prompted you to write that, Mr. Fahmy?
I wrote that in a very diplomatic manner as well. I'm very, very angry at the way Al Jazeera has handled this whole situation. The issue with Al Jazeera is that they have an Arabic arm and an English arm, where I was working for, and I was very proud to be working for 3 months as a bureau chief. However, they have displayed epic negligence, like I called it, by not providing the proper broadcast licenses, press passes, licenses for equipment, and we got convicted for that, the 1 year for operating licenses without equipment. And moreover, they did another big mistake, which they started taking our English content and dubbing it into Arabic and using it on the Al Jazeera Mubashir Egypt network, which has been banned by a court in Egypt. When this first happened, I was against it completely. I sent emails and I made phone calls asking them to remove it. They removed it the first time. They did it again, but this time they brought in guests and graphics, and they made a whole show out of it. And these couple of these mistakes made our prosecution, our situation in court, much harder. It made it much more difficult. It continues to make my situation in the retrial a serious obstacle, and this is part of my new strategy for the defense, is to separate between my actions as a journalist and the actions of the network that has kept us in the dark and has also portrayed a negligence of responsibility. You are a manager, you know that if you do these issues and take my content and use it somewhere else, that's going to put me in trouble. I mean, it's fine for a network to use its content in any way they want, but in Egypt, when the Al Jazeera Arabic arm has been under the microscope, their offices has been shut, they've not been allowed to operate, putting your English team in that position is part of the problem that we are facing in court today.
Understood. Let me ask you one last thing, Mr. Fahmy, and that is about your Fahmy Foundation. What is that?
Well, Steve, since I've been out, I haven't been able to work as a journalist. So while I was in prison, I registered an NGO in Canada, federal nonprofit organization, with my lawyers and my fiancée, and we are advocating for imprisoned journalists across the world, financially and advocating for them, especially that I felt how that is to be able to pay for my legal fees myself in jail. I've paid more than $150,000 for my legal fees, and now we are trying to do that. We are preparing a rally on May 3rd, which falls on World Press Freedom Day. It's going to be in Vancouver, outside the Vancouver Art Gallery at 11 a.m. We have speakers from UBC, the head of the journalism the journalism School of Journalism, Mr. Peter Klein. We have members of the families of some of these imprisoned journalists like Mr. Jason Rezian, the American reporter for Washington Post, who's in Iran on bogus charges, the Qatari poet who's in Qatar serving 15 years for insulting the emir, and two Egyptian photojournalists, Shaukan and Ziara, who are in Egypt for doing nothing than their job, and they're still facing bogus charges. And my idea with this is that I felt how it is to be a victim. You are under this war on terror. The so-called war on terror has limited freedom of speech. It has hit me in the soul, where I am now part of this ongoing injustice. And I'm hoping that this support that I got, this unprecedented support, that I can give back. And we have a very good team. We have some good speakers attending the rally. We got all the permissions and the licenses to do it. And it should be a very powerful rally. And we have some media covering it. And it's a message to world leaders that you cannot get away. You cannot get away with clamping down on journalism. We have the right to report freely and safely. And we as journalists are part of this democratic, what these leaders want to promote as democracy. Journalism, free journalism, is part of that.
Mr. Fahmy, we wish you well in your quest for justice, and we thank you for talking about it with us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.